As I mentioned, with me on the program this morning, the Shadow Immigration Minister, Richard Marles, and the Assistant Infrastructure Minister, Jamie Briggs. Gentlemen, welcome. First of all, Jamie
Keiran.
Briggs, to you on the reaction to this. I know it's a draft and you know, it's out there for discussion, but if I just look at one response, the Australian Israel Jewish Advisory Council, Colin Rubenstein, says that he believes that it's gone too far, that it threatens the rights of citizens to go about their lives with dignity and free from racial harassment.
Colin's a good person, and his feedback will be vitally important, as the rest of the Australian community's feedback will be in the next 30 days as we seek to get the balance right in this clause. And I think it's a real credit to George Brandis the way he's gone about consulting with the community, and it's of course in vast contrast with the behaviour of the previous government, where they just inflicted change on people. Look at the mining tax, classic example, where they put a tax in place which doesn't raise any revenue, has massive spending against it, and of course is damaging our mining industry.
Let's stick to the racial discrimination act.
Well, that's the point though, and what we've done here is we made a commitment before the election to look at the current section to address the problems that we see that are there with it and to try and improve it. And now what we've done is drafted something, going to the community to consult with them. And look, I welcome very much the Labor Party's newfound commitment to stop playing games on these issues. And I know Richard's about to apologise for the brochure that was put out in the South Australian election about Carolyn Habib, a candidate with a Lebanese last name, which was used in the most disgusting way that even some Labor members publicly, Ed Husick, privately, many of them have expressed grave concern about. And also, I'm sure Richard's about to say the union movement should stop playing the dog whistle with 457 workers. And if we can move on from that sort of behaviour, that'd be terrific.
Richard Marles, the point that Jamie Briggs makes about consultation, this is something, an exposure draft of the legislation, and the Prime Minister was very keen to highlight that yesterday.
Well, they've come to consultation kicking and screaming, that's the truth of it, and they have yet to articulate exactly what was wrong with the Racial Discrimination Act as it stood. I mean, it is right that we should have laws in this country which prevent racial vilification, which incite hatred and on occasions violence. People should be able to feel that they can go about their lives in safety no matter what their background, and racial vilification ought to have no place within our society. So it's right that we have laws about it, and you know, these were laws which banned the most extreme kind of behaviour. There were not many prosecutions under it as it existed, so it's not obvious to anybody why there is a need to water it down and what public policy objective is being sought by watering it down. But this is some ideological bent on the part of the government. I think in truth they have a particular case in mind, and it's always dangerous to legislate across the whole country because of one incident, but that's what they've got in mind, and they are only consulting now because we dragged them to it.
Well, Jamie Briggs, there's one, you can respond to Richard. I also want to point to a clause 4 in the draft exposure, which seems to be a catch-all, and I suppose this is something that the attorney's been asked about, but doesn't it diminish the rest of the measures when you say in section 4, this section does not apply to words, sounds, images or writing spoken, broadcast, published or otherwise communicated in the course of participating in the public discussion of any political, social, cultural, religious, artistic, academic or scientific matter. It's hard to think that David Irving, the Holocaust denier, would be caught up in this when you've got that catch-all.
Well, look, that's why we're consulting, and I know it's an unusual concept for the Labor Party for a government to go through a proper process of talking to the community before inflicting bad policy. And if there are improvements that you can make to what has been released, then you know, the Attorney General's indicated we'll make them.
But are you saying that would be an improvement to get rid of that provision that Keiran just described?
Well, I'm not the Attorney General, Richard, and I appreciate your faith in me, but this is something the Attorney General is consulting with the Australian public about. We said before the election, and again I know promises prior to the election and keeping them afterwards is a foreign concept.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment.
And it's taking some time for you to work it out. I know, but that's what we said we'd do, and we do think that there was a problem with the previous section.
And what was that problem? That's the thing that everyone is scratching their head about.
Well, that was the issue that we said before the election. We thought there was an issue, and it's certainly related to. Well,
but what was it?
Well, there was issues in relation to Andrew Bolt's case. And
so it's about Andrew Bolt?
No, the issues raised within that case caused concern. The Attorney General indicated before the election we would, if elected, look at that, and we've done that. We're now consulting with the general community, and if there are improvements that can be made, this government will listen and make them.
So what we've got is the Andrew Bolt legislation. I mean, that's essentially what Jamie's just said, and that's what I said before. It's a mistake.
Welcome to modern Labor Party.
Well,
you can't have a debate.
It's a mistake on the basis of one case, one incident, to now put in place legislation or change legislation which will apply to everybody. And I think that is the problem here. There hasn't been any proper articulation of what was the public policy wrong which needed to be solved here, and that's why I think everyone is scratching their heads. And it's fine to go out and consult. It's great that the Libs are now doing that. Fact of the matter is they weren't going to until we raised this and made this an issue, as we've done from day one.
Well, Richard did, he's right. He has switched sides, and he sat in our party room yesterday, and we welcome Richard coming over and sitting in our party room.
Are your colleagues relaxed about it, though? Because I've spoken to a number who have issues with it. Are they comfortable with this now?
Gee, oh my gosh, there's a debate within a political party about a policy issue. I know, again, this parliament has become so obsessed in the last 5 years about who's knifing who and who's Bill Shorten doing the job on this time. This is a policy issue which people are having a debate about. I know it's unusual, I know people are struggling with the concept, but stick with us, it's a good thing.
We're just struggling with the substance.
I know you're struggling with substance, mate. I know you're struggling with substance.
No one has been able to articulate what was the problem. That's the issue. And I know that you're doing an admirable job in talking about everything else other than this. We've gone from mining tax to
it's a good point.
Party history.
I'm glad you've raised the mining tax. I'm glad you've raised it.
In terms of this issue, fundamental thing is, what was wrong in the first place? We just can't work it out.
It was an issue, as we said. We took to the election because we
Did George Brandis overstep the mark when he said people have a right to be a bigot this way? Was that the sort of language you should use?
The point that the Attorney General was making is this very simple one. You cannot stop, you cannot prevent through legislation improper behaviour, improper words being used in debate. When you live in a free society, you have to, unfortunately, at times, counter bigoted arguments with facts. We are trying to counter the bigoted argument from the union movement on 457s all the time with facts. And we are trying to counter.
Well, let's bring in Richard on that, because there was a famous person who espoused quite a few bigoted points in this very place not so long ago, Pauline Hanson. And she did it on the floor of the Parliament.
Well, I think in terms of improper behaviour, Jamie is right that legislation won't stop improper behaviour, but if we are now getting to a point where we are saying that we oughtn't to have laws which prohibit improper behaviour, whatever that behaviour is.
Not saying that.
No, well, that's what. Well, if you're not saying that, then it is appropriate to have laws which prevent improper behaviour. That doesn't mean that people won't behave improperly, but it does mean that they are then contrary to the law. Now, in terms of, I think to go out there, as George Brandis did, and say that the people have a right to be bigots, is an appalling statement, a very awkward statement from our Attorney General. I mean, obviously he's trying to say something about freedom of speech, but it is exactly why the repeal of Section 18C is not in that space. 18C is not about freedom of speech, it's about racial vilification and making people's lives a misery.
Let's move on to the economic debate now, and I will have more on this one with Colin Rubinstein from the Jewish Council and also representatives from the Institute of Public Affairs. That's after 9 o'clock. But on the economic debate, Joe Hockey's message, warning of a time bomb in previous Labor spending, $27 billion in the out year. Has Labor left the coalition with a little nasty surprise?
Labor left this government with a AAA credit rating from all all the international credit rating agencies. Now, that's not something that John Howard left the Rudd government in 2007. Well, you can laugh, but it is actually...
You're now attacking John Howard's economic record.
I'm not. I'm just saying it's actually the fact. What Labor did in terms of our economy was see 1 million jobs added during the global economic crisis, where every other developed economy was shedding jobs. We saw our economy grow through the global economic crisis, where every other economy, bar Korea's, shrunk. So that's what we did, and that's the economy we left to this government. What we have seen since they have come to power is a desperate attempt to deficit pad, a desperate attempt to create this faux crisis, which just simply does not exist. And you saw the near $9 billion shift of money to the Reserve Bank with the stroke of a pen, adding that amount onto the deficit, all about deficit padding so that they can make these arguments. But it goes back to what Jamie said before, saying one thing prior to an election and another thing after. Before the election, we saw the coalition absolutely committing to all of Labor's spending on education, to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. This is about softening the ground so that they can attack both of those areas.
Let's hear Jamie's response.
Well, look, the point the Treasurer makes is exactly right. We budget over 4 years in the federal government, and Richard well knows this, and what the Labor Party are trying to claim are spends outside those 4 years. So, you hear Jenny Macklin and other Labor Party luminaries who are part of that successful Labor government that we've just had. It was so successful the Australian people expressed its view in September last year. They can't yet deal with that, but they keep telling us that the NDIS is fully funded. Well, it's not fully funded because you're not actually at the year where you need to fund it yet. The point the Treasurer made yesterday is that's this year. That's this year. So there is a whole bunch of spending. That's the same with the Gonski, so-called Gonski reforms, which all the spending was in the 5th and 6th year on the Commonwealth's books. Now, if the Labor Party can't recognise that, it is little wonder that Wayne Swan promised a surplus over 300 times, and Chris Bowen, in fact, said he delivered one. I mean, they're so unfamiliar with the concept of surpluses that they promise them before they deliver them, and now they want to talk about them again. I mean, it is embarrassing for them.
What about
Chris Bowen's display yesterday just shows how inexperienced he is and would be such a risk if he was ever to be part of a senior part of a government.
Richard, I'll come back to you just briefly, but I just want to ask Jamie quickly, we've got to wrap it up on this issue, but on the Parliamentary Budget Office analysis that released by Labor, your thoughts on that, given it's saying that on the pre-election parameters, you'd be in surplus in 5 years?
Well, the Labor Party are voting against their own saving measures in the Parliament. So their own pre-election commitments, they're now voting against in the Parliament.
Okay. Richard?
So look, Jamie made an important contribution before, and he and I are in agreement, because what this is all about is the NDIS and it is Gonski. That's what it's about. And this is about softening the ground. So
it's just complete rubbish.
So the coalition,
it's complete rubbish.
Before the election they were committing to both of those things.
No, we never said the 5th and 6th year of Gonski. No, we did not.
Well, you signed
don't commit to 5 and 6 years,
You
Richard.
signed up to Gonski, you signed up to the NDIS, and you're about to walk away from it, and that's what this is all about.
Just shows how they can't manage the budget if they don't even understand how many years you budget over.
We're going to go to a break. Back in just a moment. Stay with us.